I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on December 4th, 2015. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have independent strengths experts and coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window down there. You can just log in. Bottom left-hand corner, log in as a guest, create that account. Put your name in there and hit submit. Best way to get your questions into this program live. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, send us an email. Really, all your questions can come to this email address, coaching@gallup.com. Or there's a contact form right there on the page. If you were thinking about maybe becoming a certified coach with us, that's the best way to do that as well. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder trading needs. You can also catch the video both streaming now, downloadable audio for offline listening to the past shows, as well as the links to all our mobile applications where you can get your top 5 right there on your phone. All available at your fingertips, all available at the coach's blog. This is the most important address, or one of them, coaching.gallup.com. Heather Wright is our host today. Heather works as a senior learning and development consultant with Gallup here on the riverfront. Heather, it's always great to see you, and welcome to another Called to Coach.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here and be with you, and I'm especially glad to get to host this guest because Mike McDonald is someone I've known for a long time. We actually were classmates in college and shared the same major, so we go way back. But even better, it's been fun for me to kind of watch his career at Gallup and all of the people that I've met and interacted with that will quote Mike McDonald. There's all sorts of McDonaldisms out there of what people learned from Mike McDonald or how he coached them or how he helped them become the star that they are today here at Gallup. And so I'm really excited to introduce Mike McDonald. His official title, for those of you who are curious about those things, he's a performance manager for Outbound Engagement and Recruiting here at Gallup. Mike's top 5 in order here: ideation, input, learner, achiever, and focus. And it's funny because Mike and I have both worked here at Gallup for many, many years, but our paths work-wise don't cross very often. And then all of a sudden these past couple of months, we've had lots of opportunities to partner. He's been my co-facilitator for high performance management courses that we've led here on the Riverfront campus. We're in the Gallup Masters program together, helping people think about preparing for retirement, and now here Called to Coach. So really glad to be partnering with an old friend, but also a real rock star here at Gallup. So thanks, Mike, for joining us today.
No, I love it. Thanks for that, Heather. That was very, very nice of you.
Yeah.
And likewise, right back at you. I should tell everybody I used to cheat off Heather in college. It got me multiple times. Wouldn't be here without her.
Yeah, right. Oh, gosh. So I think about, Mike, whenever we do Called to Coach, one of my first questions I always want to hear from people is, what called you to coach? And it's interesting for you in the context of being a manager at Gallup, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what brought you to Gallup, what keeps you at Gallup, and what calls you to coach in your role every day.
Yeah, you bet. I was thinking about that question as you kind of trace your steps back from some of the earlier memories up to where we're at now having this conversation. So my dad was an actual high school coach, and so you think about nature, nurture, and the interactions there. And I remember as I went participated in sports and was on teams and things like that, I had this fascination, quite frankly, with all-star teams, more so than anything else. And so, Heather, when we go back to our broadcasting days, I had these grand visions of being, on air for ESPN. But as I would play out that scenario, I'd be thinking, I'm going to be sitting across from LeBron James or Michael Jordan or somebody like that, and I want to find out what makes that rare talent completely just explode. This person is so different in what they're able to do. What is that thing? And I was just insanely curious about what that would be. So anyway, so you could see a little bit of a seed, I guess, planted there in terms of an attraction towards what's going on with these types of groups. But from the coaching standpoint, what I always found fascinating was, while we know that talent is the biggest X factor and it wins out across every single challenge or attempt at success, you would see examples of times where these all-star teams would inexplicably not translate on their talent. It wouldn't lead to the success in every case that you would think that it fundamentally should when you just add up this person plus this person plus this person. And I was like, now how does that, what's going on there in that mix? And so you would see then in the backdrop, you'd see a Phil Jackson working, or you'd hear a Vince Lombardi story, or a Tom Osborne story, or or a great teacher, right? Or a great parent, somebody who was in the mix that was assembling the pieces and creating awareness around every individual's edges and how they fit together, in that puzzle-like fashion. And that really clicked for me, to be honest. And what was really, I guess, exciting as I preached to the choir here was just to be able to see how the application of that mind is universal. I mean, you can be a parent, you can be a teacher, you can be a great member of your community or a great member of your church, whatever you want to be. If you recognize and possess that kind of aptitude or desire, you can be that agent in all of those scenarios. So that really stokes my fire, I guess, when I think about that. And it's just endlessly fascinating. I mean, there's unlimited potential and possibilities out of it as well.
Absolutely. So. I love that. And I love, the idea of the passion about rare talent. And I think for a lot of our coaches out there, it's that idea of, who do I want to coach? Where do I want to make my investment? And for you, it really seems like it is about assembling all-star casts. And I love yourself calling yourself the agent. That idea of, without Phil Jackson, Dennis Rodman's career might not have been as good as it was, because he wasn't exactly the easiest person to manage. But somehow Jackson could kind of see the potential, the talent there, and say, okay, how do we work with this?
Yeah.
Tell me about some of your all-stars. I'm always curious about kind of where your coaching has had impact. What are the fun stories that you like to share, or the great memories that come to mind when you think of some of your all-stars that you've seen grow through the coaching that you've done with them, the conversations that you've had, the focus that you've had on their talent?
Yeah, no, that's such a fun opportunity. So, we have again, so many different touch points really around strengths in so many ways. I would say probably a couple of the more unique ones that have happened recently. We had a manager intern with us, and a very talented individual, but he was like a junior. He's a junior in college a couple of years ago, and he had an affinity for strengths and engagement and all the things that Gallup would talk about from a best practice standpoint. And he came in. He was really good. I mean, he was a really good manager, but he's an entrepreneur also. And so he had enough of a different portfolio talent-wise to look at that just wasn't traditional. He wasn't your traditional high performance manager. He had a different kind of perspective and lens that he looked at that was, again, kind of this entrepreneurial side. So the cool part of this story is he was really, really good for us while he was here, but he's not here anymore. That entrepreneurial piece took him down a different path. But the fun part of that is as he developed and grew, he and I interacted quite a bit just through his strengths, and obviously we know that the self-awareness and the possession of that strengths awareness in our leaders is the best way to influence an organization or a team. That's your chain reaction right there, where that's going to start. But anyway, so as he and I would involve ourselves in these conversations, he was significance, he was communication, he was woo, he was command, and then he was includer. He leveraged his strengths and what he knew about engagement to win a $50,000 grant from the University of Nebraska. He won this entrepreneurial contest.
Wow.
But as he and I have talked, and our relationship just continues, he can go back very specifically to, as he put together his proposal for that contest, his reference to his own self-awareness of his strengths, and in how he could leverage that in the creation of a new business that would attract the attention and have merit in his business plan enough to where he would indicate that was the clarifying distinction. Wow. That's what really separated him from the rest of the pack. I love the story because that's something that obviously we're very excited about. Gallup is growing those entrepreneurs, and you see though the very beginning of that the potential, his potential really came alive, and he was awake to it from those strengths coaching conversations. He was really able to cast a big gaze out for what might be in his career.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I bet he looks back years from now and says, wow, if I hadn't taken that internship, if I hadn't really gotten to know my strengths and had those conversations, that pivotal conversation, who knows where, how the path changes.
Yeah, no, well, he references that very specifically. Very, very savvy, very sophisticated for his age, and he's experiencing great success and growth. And he was even talking about, and now he's obviously incorporated entrepreneurial, strengths in his awareness into all of that. But he will go back and say that there was kind of a tipping point where he wouldn't go so far as to say that he was fearful, but he was apprehensive about his confidence level in, do I really have what it takes to do this? I mean, he had a lot of, excitement and there was that kind of not positive anxiety about, what could be, but until he came to Gallup and in his own self-awareness driven specifically by his strengths, he pretty much will say in his testimony that he would not have probably taken that first big step to push on. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So that strengths conversation is an empowering conversation for people.
It is.
Good.
Yeah.
What about others? I think about some of the people that I've met that have worked with you, that they have had like a fire lit inside of them about strengths and the power that, because you're kind of a coach to managers.
Yeah.
Yourself, but also a coach to people who manage others. And when I hear their energy about what they've learned from you about coaching people around their strengths and how they know that focusing on people's strengths is such an integral part of their success in getting their team to succeed. Any other examples or stories of impact that stand out to you?
Yeah. We with our managerial roles, we have a lot of different focal points around this notion, obviously, of engagement, right? And we know that there's a kind of an order to how people experience and process being new to a group, and then being more comfortable with that group, and then being a leader of that group. And the process is obviously it's really similar for any of us, in any new group of people that we're joining. So we're really intentional about thinking about who our managers are in their own experiential journey, and making sure that the strengths are addressed and acknowledged in every step along the way. So I'll kind of back this out a little bit. So let's say, for the sake of example, that typically the first question that somebody will ask themselves when they're new to a group is, what do I get? Okay, so rather than getting too far ahead of ourselves and trying to push them further than that question and that answer, we can just settle in and just say, you know what? You're a new manager. This is your second, third, or fourth month. Maybe it's your first 6 months. Let's just worry about that question, and let's look at your strengths. So when we think about your top 5, what specifically are you going to get as an opportunity to develop those? What are you going to receive from an awareness standpoint, and not just in the workplace, but where is that going to cascade into your personal life, and how do those anchor together to really make that a powerful foundation for you to settle in and feel fantastic about the integration of your role here at Gallup into your own life, and so we can have those very specific design conversations in that regard. So, you can formalize that and have it, and that matters. And so we've seen really tremendous, like our onboarding, quite frankly, has really popped as a result of just placing the strengths awareness around that one question. Then, we evolve, we grow. Our next question that we will typically ask ourselves is, so what do I give? My first question's been answered really well, and I feel like my identity needs more to matter. And so that's, you're looking at kind of a performance contribution there, a productivity contribution. And again, so our touch point around strengths will play a very formal part where sitting down with that manager and showing, look at what has happened since you've been here. Look how much your output has grown. Let's connect that back intentionally, or quite frankly, proactively, we would have had conversations about how they will leverage their strengths for that output, and so they can make those tangible connections, in terms of like, this happened because of this strength or these strengths or what have you. And then what's really fun, I think, quite frankly, this next step is where I think we see a lot of exciting things happen. But the question of how do I belong? And again, so now we know we get something, we give something, but relationally, do we matter? Not just our performance, but do we actually matter to people, personality-wise, relationally, and there's a uniqueness about who a person is when they come into the workplace. And so, again, it's a blast because that's where you really see genuine, legitimate best friends at work start to happen outside the workplace. And then the level of meaningfulness that the workplace takes on at that point, I think really separates itself out from the good to the great, if we can throw a cliche out there. And so again, we're very intentional about that. So we talk about people to kind of reflect back on, as you look at your top 5 strengths and you think about the comments and the characteristics that people will typically assign to you, what are the connections that you make there? So, I would say maybe something that people might kind of say for me is that I'm kind of my mindset is kind of a teacher. So if I manage or lead, it's through teaching, and and you can see from my top 5, that's kind of the way I'm wired. So I would say, so if that's something that people will call me as teacher or mentor or whatever that might be, then I can make that formal connection to okay, so how actively involved am I in positioning and organizing my strengths to connect to that kind of assigned characteristic or feature that people would associate. And then ultimately, this last question: how do we grow? How do we see our identity through our strengths at the organizational level? How, so if I can't now, at that point, I can't separate myself out from Gallup. If anything that happens to Gallup positively or negatively affects me emotionally, affects me personally. And so how do my strengths make sense out of that sense of belonging at the organizational level as I transmit and receive an experience that way? But anyway, to go back to your original question, Heather, if I may, is we're able to just coach each manager at each one of those touch points, but then our expectation is that as they lead their teams, they are also modeling, and so it's kind of an equip and release type of mindset, equipping that manager to experience that, but then also to go out and provide that specifically for their own team in the same way. So.
I love the cascade of that, and I especially love, when you're talking about the do I belong phase of the journey. I love the duality of my strengths are things that I belong because my strengths help me show up in terms of my performance, but also I really am engaged when people are appreciating my strengths for what it means to kind of the culture of the team too.
Yeah.
So that's a really neat dynamic.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of coaching to that, right?
Yeah, it does. And not to flip side, or to get onto the other side of the coin, but it's fun to talk about, so what wouldn't happen? What would be that absence? And it's not a cliche. We know it's mathematically true. If you're not there, that's a spot. It won't be replaced. I mean, it just won't be. So now, what is not that that's a threat, but what does that feel like? And sometimes I think people it's easier for them to grab onto the absence of it sometimes earlier on than it is the presence of it earlier on. So it's I think it's a healthy conversation in both directions.
It is, and I think it's important that people that a lot of times, even in our strengths coaching courses, we're talking about how do we name it, claim it, and aim it.
Right.
And I think oftentimes my first default as I think about naming, claiming, and aiming is about performance, right? Mm-hmm. It's about how can I do better, or how can I help other people do better. Right. And I think if you think about it, oftentimes we talk about our talent is not just the role, but it's our soul. And that idea of, how does my talent show up in terms of the presence of my soul on this team or in my role, that I do it with, it was interesting. We were in that master's program together last week, and someone wrote me a drop, and it wasn't just about the job that I did in that session, but it was about who I was in that session, and that just kind of resonated with me, and I think you brought it home just now, that when we're coaching people, as coaches, our opportunity is to help them think about who they are as a human being in addition to what they are doing. So the being and the doing, the soul and the role. I mean, lots of our coaches have thought that through before, but I wonder how intentionally we've coached to that. And I think you've just given us a framework for how to make sure we're coaching to both sides of the person, the totality of the person.
And I'll tell you, that's I'm sure for everyone, that's probably their best coaching moment is what, we love the sense of meaningfulness that we create for working here at Gallup, in our coaching, and in the presence of strengths, and all the accentuation of every positive experience that somebody could have, but where you really, I think, see it capture that soul that you're talking about is when you hear people reference the action of strengths outside the workplace, and when they come back in, and so they've been coached around their strengths in the workplace, but then they come back the next day and they're like, hey, I was talking about this with my kids, and our dynamic now is so much better and different than it was before. And then all of a sudden the vision of what work or purpose here means has taken on a completely different form. And when you were talking, literally I would say my favorite strength story of anybody that I've ever worked with, and is a kind of a graphic example of that, but we had a lady we worked with. Her name was Danny, just a tremendous contributor for our team when back in the early 2000s, and she contracted cancer. So definitely a pretty sobering moment for all of us, and we had a lot of concern. Her strengths were woo, includer, positivity, learner, and input. Okay. And she, so we were keeping in touch with her. She was going through treatment. She was inpatient, and she was just as positivity people are. She was continually upbeat. I mean, her bucket was not going to run out on this deal. She typed back a note that it just seared itself into my mind. I will never forget it. But she, so I will beat this. And she said, I am using my woo to go around. She goes, I know all the nurses, I know all the doctors, I know everybody on this floor. And she goes, and that gives me a lot of great energy. It's fascinating meeting these people, hearing their stories and part of their story. And she goes, and my includer, she goes, so I'm trying to not just have people isolated. So as much as people can possibly be mobile, we're trying to get together and hang out and just kind of be our own family, et cetera, et cetera. Learn, input, she goes, I am insatiably pursuing the knowledge that I can capture as fast as I can, as much as I can, because that gives me confidence. That gives me, I can move through with intentionality in all the things that I'm facing. And she goes, of course, my positivity. She goes, that there is no other option. And she's a survivor. I mean, it's a great story, but nobody intentionally coached Danny through. Here's how you need, Danny. Here's how you need to use your top 5 strengths. She had actually experienced that in her workplace at a meaningful enough level that she was able to apply it to her life, and that's where you see that fantastic integration. I think it expresses itself in that soul that that commentary that you had as well.
Yeah, and I think too, Mike, that makes me think about just even a work-life balance. When people can integrate who they are into how they show up each day in their workplace, as well as how they're a better community member, family member, friend. That integration, I think, also probably makes a big difference in how people feel about their work-life balance. That because I'm myself when I'm here at work, just like I am myself when I leave here, I'm not a different person. I'm not having to use a different energy or a different part of myself or keep things aside that I can't use here at work. I think that wholeness of their talent then helps them feel a little more comfortable about how much time they're spending where, and feeling that and energized by that as opposed to depleted by it.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Well, we do know, I mean, all our research would tell us, but the relationship between strengths and well-being is very well documented. And there's just something that happens, when a workplace takes on a different stance or approach towards the involvement of families, and the inclusion of families into the workplace. And again, that can be very strengths related and very strengths driven. But well, you see amazing things happen from a well-being standpoint. And again, that's very part and parcel with that well-being experience, without a doubt.
Very good. So we've got a question that's come up in regard to getting managers to connect. And Jim, it went away on me. I lost it.
Yeah, actually, just click on the blue button up in the top left for you, and that question will show up over to the right.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so in regard to getting managers to connect their self-awareness with their signature strengths, Mike, do you have a question or two that you really like to ask? Things that get them cranking.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that got asked. We are really big on these two notions, projection and minimization. And not only that a manager can experience that, but then how they can continually cycle around that with their own teams as they build those individuals up to where they can interact really well together. And the projection piece, as we would, coach it into a manager, is just, if, when we use ourselves as the benchmark of normalcy for the rest of the world to operate by. So if I'm ideation, input, learner, achiever, and focus, and guess what, Heather and Jim, you guys are not. What's the problem with you guys? And you need to start seeing the world the way I do, because it certainly makes sense to me, and you guys need to catch up, okay? That's obviously a big trap, and I think it's a super easy one that everybody can easily fall into. But so with our managers, what we do is we'll just, we'll bring that notion up, but then it's like, so identify for yourself as a manager, which one of your top 5 strengths are you most likely to project onto or expect another person, or quite frankly, the flip side, which one of your top 5 strengths bothers you when somebody else doesn't possess that? So for me, it would be focus. If somebody can't kind of keep their eye on the ball and pay attention to the track we're on, that I can get a little cranky on that. But managed expectation, guess what? If somebody doesn't have focus, that's on me, not on them. And so there's an awakening there. There's an awareness that helps me now be aware of myself as a manager, but now I can lead my team and develop that out in them. And so we're constantly mindful of those edges, and more so how they fit than how they kind of conflict, I guess, in that regard. Mm-hmm. I think another one then that's fun too is this, again, the notion of minimization, and that goes back to this issue really of blind spots. So if it's easy for me to come up with ideas, then it's probably easy for you, Heather, to come up with ideas. Therefore, I probably don't have any real unique contribution to add. So I withdraw, and I just kind of put that on the back burner, and I don't really lead with that. I don't understand. That's a very unique contribution that I have to make in order for my team, our team, to be optimized. And so again, it's helping the managers then understand and feel that, then in a way that they can draw that out and not allow that to happen as they build up their own teams. And then I think probably the kind of the third one that kind of gets at some pretty interesting conversation. Which of your top 5 strengths gets you into trouble? And then on the flip side, which one gets you out of trouble? And what's really fun is when you hear somebody say it's the same strength. The same strength will get them into and out of trouble, both in one fell swoop. So anyway, those are just kinds of what we're trying to do. It goes back to that equip and release type of mentality. How do we, arm a manager with just a few fundamental questions, but those questions can produce endless conversations and awareness in their teams.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Go performance on.
And the other thing we teach in the strengths curriculum that I think a lot of our coaches probably have experienced, but I think it fits with what Mike's been talking about here, is that idea of getting people to talk about peak performance moments. Like think about a recent success, or think about kind of your best day at work, or think about your best productive outcomes, and which of your strengths were you using there, and really get them to think about and attach their favorite moments, their best performances, to what strengths were showing up in that case, so that they can then be even more intentional moving forward.
Yeah, we talk a lot. One of the more, again, very fun conversations we have, but with our manager groups, we talk about hero creation. That if there's one output that if we can hit the target on, that we'll win every single time, it's that notion of hero creation. So understanding every person is a hero, is supposed to be a hero. Now, how do we make that happen? And then what's that heroic moment going to be? Or what's going to happen adversely for our team if that person isn't a hero at the time we need them to be a hero? And so it's really fun to think about. It goes back to that kind of being the agent to the stars, or being engaged in that star making kind of process. So
absolutely,
obviously Strengths does all of that. So yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Any other tips or tricks or best practices that you would share that our coaches might be able to integrate into their coaching?
Yeah, so we do a lot. I know that Shane Lopez has been on some shows, and he's definitely somebody to pay attention to with his notion of hope. One of the things that from a strength standpoint that we've done intentionally that I think has made a pretty decisive difference is when we look at Shane's notion of hope, and we look at the delivery of hope through agency and pathways and goals. And so just for a real, I'll insult Shane with my attempt to repeat back what those things are, but you have goals are just do you know what the thing is that you need to be hitting? Do you know what it looks like essentially, and do you have it identified? Agency is, do you have a group of people Do you have a social network that can help you get to that goal? Who would those people be? And the pathways are, do you have a strategy? Is there a cohesive approach that you can take, an order or some steps that can legitimately and realistically get you to those goals? And then you have to have those three, obviously, top of mind as you orchestrate what that can look like. And so when we bring new associates on board, we think about kind of going back to that "what do I get" question. We think very intentionally about what fundamental contribution is supposed to look like. And let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, but let's think about how we arm them with this notion of hope, what this future could look like, but building on our present opportunity in our present moment. So we'll think about Heather's top 5 strengths, and then we'll think about, so Heather, right now, what are you thinking about? What would be a goal for you that would take us on into the future in a way that's meaningful and relevant for you right now? And so you would name that, and then we would be like, okay, so Heather, here's your 5 strengths. How do you think those are going to help you make sense out of what that goal could look like? So then you would talk about your strengths, and it would be, okay, so Heather, based on your strengths, what's the pathway going to look like? Do you have a lot of critical thinking themes that are going to help you analyze or be strategic or learn something or gather information through your input that are going to get you there? Well, or who are the agency? Who are the people in your life that you're going to attract and be attracted to that can help be that support network that'll complement and supplement some of those pieces that will help you arrive at that goal? So we have it, quite frankly, it's a career/purpose well-being coaching discussion that integrates strengths into all of that. Later on down the road, then there's another element of well-being, financial well-being. Okay, and that can be a very, for lack of a better word, scary element of well-being for some people. And there's a component within that element of well-being, which is a financial future confidence, is what it is. And in the Gallup database, that's the most at-risk component. It's the hottest of hot spots when it comes to well-being. There's a real, I guess, again, for lack of a better word, to be graphic, but there's a fear factor about what that can and should look like for a lot of people. A lot of avoidance, comes out of even wanting to acknowledge that. And so we try to breathe life into the positivity and the reality, in the sense that that whatever those goals are, those can be strengths infused. And so let's chase the boogeyman back into his corner, so to speak. And so we have a financial well-being conversation that integrates strengths into what those future financial goals might be, and again, it integrates the agency, the pathways, and so on into that. And so there's intentionality, but every single time we ground those conversations to strengths, that's our fuel source. If we don't have strengths plugged in a really upfront and powerful way, the rest just kind of sputters and grinds to a halt. We've got nothing to operate from. So
yeah. Very good. Jim, any more questions you have coming in from our chat room?
A quiet chat room today, but Mike, let me ask you this. You did some doctoral work in this. Can you talk a little bit about that? You spent a lot of time getting that done, right?
Thank you for saying that, Jim. I appreciate it.
We do not celebrate that enough, but if from your standpoint, just talk a little bit about the work that you did there.
Sure. So what I looked at was how leader self-awareness translates into team engagement. Okay, and so we know a lot about leaders from our work around the 7 demands of leadership, obviously, and in workplace engagement and what that looks like. And so in one single phrase, what I was looking at is, if a leader is more self-aware, does that then translate into higher levels of team engagement? So kind of the backstory to that would be, if Mike McDonald knows that, hey, he's strong as a team leader in this area, and he's aware of that, and that's validated by how the people around him would confirm or deny that, then he should step into these situations with that level of awareness. Conversely, if he's also self-aware of, like, these are areas where he really is not gifted, he should not step into that, but he's got people on his team that he could orchestrate and harmonize and put them in that position, then that too is awesome, and that allows Mike and the team to move forward without missing a step, very positive and redeeming way. And in theory, you would see that play itself out in the engagement level of the team that he leads, that there would be an appreciation of who we are as a team, because we all know how to orchestrate ourselves around each other as those leadership moments arise and then go back. And so, it was a very fun pursuit, a lot of really great discovery, and obviously strengths was core to all of that. In fact, one of the demands of leadership is knowing strengths. Do I know my strengths, and that boundaries and limitations piece that comes along with that. Anyway, the kind of surface level discoveries I think that were made out of that were that there were two of the demands that showed correlation to the outcome of team engagement, and the one is visioning, and the other is mentoring. And I find that to be interesting, and especially, as we relate it back to this strengths discussion, in the fact that I don't think it shocks anybody that if we were to sit down and just think about ourselves, is there anything that would be more powerful in our own experience, wherever we're at, than to have somebody who cares about us deeply enough for us to consider them as a mentor, but then to also have the ability in that person to where they can show us our best possible selves out into the future through that visioning piece. And so just in a dare I say, a common sense pragmatic level of just like, that makes sense. I think we could probably all kind of nod our head and be like, that kind of adds up. There's the other demands, but those two showed the strongest correlation, at least in the level of examination that I was looking at. But I think it's still that's what fascinates me, Jim, is when I get back into then Dr. Lopez's work about hope, and you see how hope is so synonymous with that future and that visioning piece. And we think about the Cantrell ladder scale, if on a 1 to 10 scale where 1 is my worst possible life, 10 is my best, where would I rank myself now? But where would I rank myself in the next 5 years? And it's really fun when you talk to people about, like, well, right now I'd say I'm a 6, but I think in 5 years I'll be at a 9. That's incredible. That's an amazing jump. And I think sometimes we don't take that as such a big deal as we could, but we see the leader impact of that visioning piece, that ability to sit down with a person, care about him, and hold the mirror up of, here's what you could look like, here's how great this could be, and I'm there with you. I mean, we're committed. We're not going to let it go away. So,
Wow.
Mike, we have a whole group of coaches that listen to this, and what's the relationship? This is a struggle, I think, for a lot of people. The relationship between this mentoring or managing and coaching. So, are to be a great manager, do you have to be a great coach? Are all coaches great managers? How do you see the two relationships be? And I know at the end of the day, those are just terms, right? But can you think, because it's a tough separation, I think, sometimes. What kind of advice would you give to our coaches going into small businesses, medium-sized, or even enterprises? How do they separate that idea of great managing and coaching?
Yeah. Wow, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to be honest, Jim. I don't know if I have the ability to separate them. In fact, I think if you were to be a great manager, you could coach. If you were a great coach, which I think you should be as a manager, the way you can amplify your abilities and the way you can clone the best of your abilities through a group of people who are committed to now contributing the best of themselves into this process, I don't know how that gets beat. And in fact, what we really try to help our managers do is sometimes the demands of the day and the task lists and some of those things try to like impose their will on us. We talk about this a lot, and we kind of personalize it. So it's like our adversary is the day. Okay, so it's Jim versus the day. Okay, and we start off at 0. So can Jim win, or is the day going to win? And the point that we're making there is that when you're coaching your team as a manager, you have to grab real estate of time, or the day is going to take it away from you. And I always take, again, I'm sure we're all fans of the Strengths-Based Leadership book, but great leaders initiate, they don't respond. And so one of the biggest things that we try to drive home from a strengths perspective with our managers is, which of your strengths cause you to initiate and to seize those prime key opportunities that are really going to matter away from the day, because the day's not going to let you have them. The day is not just going to let you roll in and just be like, hey, guess what, Heather? You just got 2 hours of free margin put into your day. Good for you. You didn't even have to do anything. That day will never happen. But we kind of get suckered into it a little bit. We think that's going to happen, and we really try to help our managers avoid that. But from a coaching standpoint, that helps them sort to those priorities, and then to just kind of exhale, let some of the secondary peripheral things subside, commit to those primary things, whatever those things are in their coaching, and trust that there's an organic cascade effect, that if they're coaching on into the strengths and development of their team, all those outputs that are so easy to be a little bit urgent for, but maybe not necessarily priority for us in the moment, tend to happen in their natural order in a much more powerful and effective way than Mike just thinking he has to do everything by himself today or it's not going to get done. And you see manager burnout. You see a lot of really highly talented managers with the best of intentions just burn out as a result of that. So I don't separate out coaching from managing at all. Now I would say though, Jim, when you talk about mentoring, I think that's a very, very different gig. And when you look at the depth that's described in our demands of leadership around mentoring, I don't know. I think what managers would have to do is they would have to prioritize who are those few individuals that I actually have the bandwidth to mentor in the most legitimate way. Because it can't be, if you overextend yourself in your attempt to mentor, then it's going to be so diluted that the effect will be lost. But what you can do, going back to some of what we were discussing earlier, is you can continue to equip others to find that mentor, to be a mentor, and to build that out, and to give people a picture of what that looks like, and to know that however it's delivered, it has to take place, and you can intentionally create a culture that will produce that will acknowledge that and receive that.
So Mike, specifically, if I'm a coach and I'm going into an environment where I'm going to coach both managers and individual contributors or team members, do I approach that coaching to the managers, or how much different do I approach the coaching to the managers versus those individual contributors on the teams?
Great question. We've always believed we always start off with who is leading that group. And with best of intentions, we've gotten ahead of ourselves. We've gotten into the team, we've gotten into the individual level prematurely and too early. But unless we've equipped that manager to sustain that, to be, quite frankly, they should be a more effective strengths agent, strengths catalyst for their team than we can. We talk about this a lot. We can't surrogate that experience and that coaching and that strengths release between a team leader and their team. So if we ever get tempted by that, we know we just have to go back to that manager and just to continue to reinvest and talk through that delivery of their team, because that relationship that they have with their team is paramount, and any attempt to muddy the waters, so to speak, around it has always backfired and worked against us. So we're pretty clear about having the horse in front of the cart on that approach.
That's awesome.
Live this day to day. From your practical experience, as you're coaching, as we're doing some of our own coaching internally, what does that look like? How do you see that? Can you explain that in words, that difference between the manager coaching and the individual contributor?
Yeah, you bet. So we will. Well, it's a lot like what Heather really had addressed earlier. We go back and we review kind of these signature moments, I guess, for lack of a better reference. So we'll ask the manager, what was your best? When you look at, like, right now, it's convenient. It's the end of 2015. What's your highlight reel from the year? If you could go back and reproduce these moments over and over and over again, what was that like? How did it feel? What was going on? And how intentional were you with using your strengths to produce that moment? Was it a reaction to the situation and your strengths showed up and then they delivered a great thing? Or was it intentional? You knew something was going to happen, you involved your strengths proactively, and then it was a great moment. And trying to help advance the self-awareness and discovery around that, because we want to repeat and produce more of those best practice moments. Conversely, though, we do talk a little bit about again, I don't know why I have this attraction, but I like to talk about fear a lot, because I think I like the enemy. I like the fact that we have an enemy, and that's kind of represented by fear. And so we'll talk about, what moment did you have that you were most apprehensive about? In relating that back to strengths, why did you persevere? There was apprehension, but you still succeeded, or there was apprehension. Was there a partner that came along and contributed their strengths, and that allowed you to persevere? And then how do we build more intentionality around that? And so, again, I I think a lot about, even our workplaces. When we look at the stats out there, I was talking to Heather about this earlier, but it's just an unfortunate reality that the workplace is a really scary place to be when you look at engagement right now. When you look at the fact that only 30% of the people out there actually are looking forward to showing up for work. We've got 50% who are completely ambivalent, playing not to lose, and then you have 20% of the people out there who are, they're actively disengaged. But I think that is so fear driven, and so I really get excited, quite frankly, about the fact that strengths is such an antidote for that we don't have to. When you know with confidence and you've been built up in your self-awareness about what your strengths are, that fear subsides so dramatically. And I think that's really an exciting thing, quite frankly, for our managers and our coaches to do, is to be able to minimize fear and push it back in a way that really does make a life transformation in that regard. But I like the enemy. I mean, we can name our enemy and we can attack it if we know that it's fear. And I don't think that's dramatic. I think that's just the fact of the matter. So for me anyway, when I got my head around that, I was like, oh gosh, we can't be messing around here. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. So.
Mike, Sherry in chat says she loves your analogy, and I do too, by the way, of the highlight reel of being able. I mean, that's a very clear going to the manager saying, give me some moments of your highlight reel for the last year when those relationships went really well. Heather, I wanted to throw it to you as we kind of wrap this up. Because you're in this day in and day out. You're coaching people. Do you have any advice? I mean, that's a great from what Mike gave. How could do you have a moment as you're coaching managers that say, that gives them that kind of thing to hang on?
That's, that highlight reel is a great piece. I go back to thinking about what's the difference between being a coach and being a manager, and where do they. And if my role is simply to coach, and it's to coach individuals and it's to coach managers, I think the piece that I keep coming back to, for Mike, maybe it's hard to separate because he is such a good manager and such a good coach, all wound up into one. You can't separate it. But I think it goes back. I was looking at my notes about when you first started talking, Mike, you started talking about people being all-stars and about just that rare talent, and that talent is what helps people win. And I think that's where the coaching piece comes into play. That as coaches, our job, a manager's job, is to help people perform, to get the processes in place that help them perform, to set the expectations with them so they know what's expected of their performance, and to kind of push them to deliver. But a coach is the one that says, yes, all those objectives have to be met, but I'm understanding you and appreciating you for your raw and powerful talent, and I want to help you kind of see that talent, to see your potential. I'm going to give you the push you need. I'm going to demand of you what you need. I'm going to teach you some refinement to your technique that's going to help you take your game to an even higher level. And I think that's where the difference in my mind is between managing and coaching. Managing is kind of driving the performance. Coaching is helping the person explore how they can take that performance to the next level. And so, Mike I think has just been a fabulous example of how that really works. So I don't know. I don't think he has to cheat off me anymore. He's doing just fine on his own. So Mike, I just can't thank you enough for just sharing your wisdom and your excellence. You're so eloquent at kind of telling the story of some really simple things that we as coaches can just tune into a little more about kind of appreciating those all-stars that we get the chance to coach every now and then, and helping them integrate into a team, to know that sometimes rare talent has to have some awareness so that they can play with the rest of the team as effectively as possible.
Very true.
Thank you for being here.
Mike. Great having you on. You mentioned strengths-based leadership, one of our books. Any other resources just on our way out that you would recommend for managers, coaches, as we think about books like that or resources available to them that you've used that have been beneficial?
Yeah, you bet. So I'll on a little bit of a broken drum here, a broken record, let's say that. But again, this notion of fear, it's a book. It's not one of our most popular, to be honest. But breaking the fear barrier, and I do think that there is some value in coaching. To help understand kind of the atmosphere of fear and what it imposes on a person, and how strengths pushes back against that, and I guess the relevance of that for for us has been that when we get our mind around what fear is doing in the workplace, and you think about the political nature of people trying to one-up each other from that standpoint, and that's fear-based. We see things, it alleviates a zero-sum mentality. And I think that's huge with strengths, because strengths is not about zero-sum. Strengths is absolutely an abundance mentality where there is more than enough for all. We can continue to create together more than we could ever get to. But that's because of strengths. It's because of strengths coaching. Without that, we get really grabby and we get really territorial and we start to get very possessive and we withdraw. And so you see the negative effect that has in the workplace. But I think that that breaking the fear barrier is awesome, and I'll make this point and then I'll let you guys have it. But I always think about when we think about those highlight reel moments, and we think about that excellence that every one of us is equipped and intended to perform at. If we are right about our coaching, and I come in and I could be in a scary situation, but I know my strengths, right? I'm armed with my strengths. I'm really, really grounded in what they are. I've been coached, and I've got that level of confidence. Now I kind of push back fear over here, and then guess what? I get to work in an engaged environment, and that's strengths driven. And I've got people who care about me. I don't have to wonder about, like, do they care about me? Or I know they don't care about me, and that stresses me out. And so I get to push back fear in this direction as well. Now my bandwidth to deliver that excellent moment that's going to matter to my organization and to my life has expanded from this little narrow niche, this mathematical miracle, to where now I'm completely operating in great space. I mean, I've got all of my energy, all of my talent is at my disposal in its entirety in that moment to dazzle a customer, to attract a client, to create a great product, to be perfect in my delivery of my performance. Whereas in other situations with fear attacking me from both sides, there's competition for my talent, and I can't do that with sustainable excellence, with sustainable growth. And so anyway, I'll throw that out there, Jim. Cool. I think that's it's kind of the flip side. It's kind of like knowing that Darth Vader is out there as well as Luke Skywalker. How's that? And I think that matters.
Very timely.
Great,
timely. How's that?
Great analogy. As we come up on. It's December and the movie will be released in a week, and so I appreciate that. If you are listening to this and you're not familiar with either one of those books, you can find them on the Gallup at the Gallup store. Just go to shop.gallup.com, search for those, and you can purchase those there. And you can find most of them in a lot of bookstores. And so, right? Did you guys see that as well?
Yes.
We'll have Roy cut that part out.
Edit that one out.
Edit that. Well, let me say, we want to remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions, comments, and if you'd like to be a guest blogger, we're looking for those as well. We're actually doing a program here in 2016 where we're going to focus each week on one of the strengths, and we created a brand new tab for that on the coaches blog. So go to coaching.gallup.com, look for GWSW, and that is our weekly strengths wisdom, is what we're calling that through 2016. We have a way for you. All the instructions are out there as well. Again, coaching.gallup.com. You can also get the links to our Facebook group, YouTube page, iTunes and RSS feeds, iPhone and Android apps, as well as the weekly strengths wisdom that's now available. Again, coaching.gallup.com. If you found this useful, we'd ask you to please share it. That's a great way. Nice compliment to us if you share it with everyone. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.